Hello, Sarah.
Hi, Louise.
How
How
are
goes
you?
it? Why did I say
Good.
that? How goes it?
How goes it, friend?
How goes it?
I'd like to take a commercial funny break that you posted something on Facebook, our old picture of our scream truck.
Oh,
And the funny
yes.
things you found in the picture made me laugh. I was just enjoying that today, re-looking at that.
Yeah. Well, I noticed the gray, I was like,
Yeah,
oh, I remember because I lived in right there. I
yeah.
remembered so well how
May Gray.
May gray and June gloom, and it would just be so hard to get moving the mist
Yep.
every day. Like,
I-
so when I romanticize, I can remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, I can remember that. And it's just funny seeing our truck next to the other trucks and the
I know
names
the
and who they
schmuck
were.
truck.
The
Yeah.
schmuck truck. We were friends with the schmuck. I
I
wonder
wonder
what
what
happened
happened
to.
to the schmuck.
I loved him. Anyway, here we
Anyway,
are for
so
serious business. Relinquished 10 years later, chapter 4.
10 years later. Yeah.
This is good because I like this. She, especially with Leah, her first person she talks about. It's like she interviews her 10 years ago from when she wrote this, and then
When she
also a
relinquished.
year too. So it was like a
Hmm.
year and then 10 years later.
Do you know
Very
what I thought was
interesting.
interesting? And it's later in the chapter, but because I was explaining what the fog meant today at a work retreat. I thought it was interesting that the the birth mothers think of it the
Yeah.
same way, right?
Yes.
And
How
that
how
it's
interesting that I didn't
yes.
know this. Yeah. Yeah, because they say it's like a 5 year maybe, but it depends on the
It
relinquishment and
some
all of
some
that.
can it can be
Immediate.
right away, it can be a
Yeah.
year later, but they call it the unicorns and
Rainbows and
something.
unicorns.
Yeah. Yeah,
W-
rainbows and unicorns. Sunshine, very sunshine and rainbows.
Right. When that wears off, they're like, wait a second.
This is horrible,
This isn't
right?
what I thought.
And to be fair, like I, I think it was Leah who thought the adoption was the best thing for,
Yeah.
that she didn't, but that still she realized how
Yes.
horrible and that would never do it again and
She wouldn't do
all
it
these
again at the
things.
beginning. She was very, she chose it. She looked at everything. She didn't want to have an abortion. She did look at everything. She felt really comfortable with the family she chose. It wasn't like they were horrible. Nothing really horrible happened with this, but and at first she was kind of what is that, a poster child person that would talk to others. And then
Mm-hmm.
now she's like, wait a second. uh, I didn't have it goes back again to help proper resources. What was she
Yes.
spoken to about, you know?
Gretchen wrote, this is, I highlighted this. When I started doing, this is Gretchen.
Mhm.
When I started doing interviews in 2010, it was clear to me that the relinquishing mothers in more recent adoptions were happier than those in older adoptions. The mothers who placed from 2000 and on were generally more optimistic and content than mothers in adoption from the 80s and 90s, and certainly were faring far better than the mothers in the closed coercive adoptions from the 1960s and early 70s.
Mhm.
However, it was impossible to know why this pattern was true due to the intertwining of both personal timelines in which mothers' feelings about their adoptions changed over time and historical timelines in which the practice of adoption changed dramatically.
Mhm.
Um, but these studies that they did, the research on long-term emotional outcomes for relinquishing mothers is ambiguous. One study found that earlier
I'm
in their
sure.
adoptions, a majority of mothers reported moderate to high degrees of grief, with this proportion decreasing over time. However, another study found that over a quarter of relinquishing mothers reported below average adjustment, and half reported an increasing sense of loss over time, stating that they experienced a strong and persistent sense of loss.
Yes.
And then another one time survey of mothers who relinquished between 1989 and 2016 found that satisfaction was lower for mothers in older adoptions and concluded that satisfaction decreases over time.
Yeah. Well, I think I even she has two other women that come into this that she talks about.
Mm-hmm.
And even the two of them that still stand by they're like the happier on the version of birth mothers, and had
Mm-hmm.
and both say, especially one, it was really based on the family. She had a family very involved with her, with pictures of her. She got to know her son well. In fact, it was harder on him. He reaches out to her more.
Right. This is
And
Leah.
yeah, and that,
Um, but
and
but what
even
ups
then,
but
yeah,
so what upset Leah was like it was about the finances, right? And she didn't
right,
think she was
right.
that she could do it. Like, and then only 3 years later, she had all the things that
That's
she
right.
had, but it was too late. And
And she got to see that she didn't really like necessarily some of the
some of
parenting
the parenting,
and
and
that
that
they
Caleb
didn't.
was more like her,
Yeah, he was more like
obviously.
her. And he didn't have actually the greatest of things going on in that family. Even though they loved him, they did take care of him. It was still like, oh, wait, I could have done this. I think
Hmm.
that's the realization. We talk about that short term. Someone said, well, if I could get a car seat home, like, how can you?
I mean,
It's a
it's
short
a
window.
short-term solution, right? To
Yeah.
that ends
Yeah.
up just being one of the worst things for many of these people, many of these mothers.
One thing that was interesting to me was the religion that played into Leah's.
Oh, of course.
Okay, so she
I
came
mean,
from
this is a recurring theme,
this is
isn't
a
it?
recurring theme. Not bashing anyone's religion. I'm just saying that she found solace in her church. They shamed her,
Mm-hmm.
made her feel bad even after. And when she would bring up, she did try to talk to people at her church because she was very involved, like of her grief. They were like, oh my God, you should be grateful for these people who have helped you. Like this is a current times, people. And, oh, be so grateful you gave your child. It's the weirdest messaging to me.
It's
As
twisted
opposed to why don't
messaging.
we get you some help and how do you feel? That's not good for anybody. I don't care if it's religion or whatever group you belong
I
to.
mean, there's a lot of stuff going
Yep.
on with that,
Yeah.
that
Yeah. And
yeah.
also, we also talked about again, one thing they do, here's just this was part of it. Because so many agencies fail to deliver on promises of meaningful support to the mothers relinquishing, they look elsewhere. They get involved with their own Facebook groups and groups how adoptees do, right?
Mm-hmm.
You were just talking about this before we got on, marginalized communities. They literally are there. Pretty much every mother that she talks to in here, by the end of it, as they get older, and then they had the women asking, other birth mothers were asking older birth mothers, they're like, don't do it. It's about the money. And then
Mm-hmm.
they'd get kicked out of these groups for being
Yes.
honest. They start to
Right. The
see,
church groups, the agency
yeah,
groups, all this stuff.
agency groups
Well, and then
too.
there's another one, Hannah. It said she didn't, her agency provided her with only 2 counseling sessions. And when she called them again because she
Yes.
was severely depressed, they told her she'd already used up her allotted visits.
And they promised her help. They said, we're here for you throughout and afterward.
Honestly, it's like a pregnant cow, right? Like
Yeah.
no use once the calf is born. Like
You're,
anyway,
yeah. There's some
here's
discussion.
another survey of birth mothers who had some contact with their child. 70% wanted increased contact, and only 20% wanted it to stay the same. 2% wanted less. For mothers who were not in contact with their child, 97% wanted to have contact, and most of them had tried to find their child. The social
Mm,
supports and skills that often make greater openness possible, grief therapy, conflict resolution, flexibility, and clear interpersonal communication, could be facilitated by agencies and adoption providers. But these types of ongoing support are rare and inadequate. And over 40% of birth mothers, a plurality, are not at all satisfied with
that's
the
right.
level of post-adoption support.
Right. Okay. So, and then we were saying there's those two, there's a woman, Megan, who was overall happy with where her child went, stayed in their lives. She just made that choice, kind of had to get okay with it. I mean, because she's close to her child. Even here it says, but Megan was not overly sunny about the practice of domestic infant adoption overall. I think I got very lucky that I had a good experience, which we know she did get lucky. When I asked if there were any systematic changes she wanted to see, she had a lengthy list.
Uh-huh.
There should be less pre-birth matching with families as early matching creates pressure. There should be less money involved. Termination of parental rights should not be allowed within a week of birth. There should be a 30-day revocation period. Openness agreements should be legally enforced. Adoption should be fully understood as a last resort. And if adopted parents don't like it, then they shouldn't adopt.
Right.
And that, and she's
And
someone
that was,
who
she
is
was
a
someone who,
successful, this is a successful open
yes,
adoption,
and
pro
she still
adoption.
has these.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And that's where the real reform, because, honestly, now knowing what we know, if there's a child in need and we had to help that child, we'd be like, of course, this, and this, where's the resources? How do we help? This is your family.
I mean,
That's not,
I would
no,
not take somebody and change
never.
their name or, I mean,
It doesn't,
I don't
because
believe
that
in
would be
plenary.
about me. That would be
Right.
about my insecurity, right? So that's,
I'm going to
or,
button my lip right now
right.
because I mean,
Right. No. Well, I
who is
mean,
adoption about really
but I
for
mean,
the
I've
most?
just learned that myself. So even if, say, you're an adopted parent, let's say it's not, this is something I've really come to terms with too. I think we all, once you have these conversations, maybe people can go, okay, I can see it different. That's the hope, right? That this book would help with the
That's the hope.
conversation. Yeah,
Yes, I hope so. Um,
I do too.
Here, I wanted to just, before we hop
Yeah.
off, about, because it gets into abortion, the presumption of abortion regret is a common one, yet research shows that 95% of women who receive an abortion believe it was the right decision for them. It's clear that despite anti-abortion messaging that has centered on abortion
Mm,
regret, a far higher proportion of women regret their adoptions than their abortions.
yes. And birth mothers mentioned in there, Sarah, they don't want to be the poster children for
Right.
abortion, and nor do we.
Oh boy, that
That ticks
and
me off.
that cringe-worthy 2014, the
Yes.
March for Life, the theme was adoption, a noble decision.
Mm.
Ugh. Anyway, I won't get into that, but
Because yeah, it's usury of women here. Anyway.
yes. And next week we will be on to page, I guess,
Yeah. Are there two people?
no,
Page.
just page. So yeah, and we'll save the longer chapter for the following week. Yep.
Okay.
Okay, and then now we have Carrie.
Care. I'll see you
Yes,
soon.
she's got a good story. Yep. See you in a minute.
See you in a minute.